Now, why are we here talking about reuse, right? I think Pascal from Comeos mentioned this morning already, one of the roles of GS1 is to scan the horizon, I think is the way he said it. And that's exactly why we created the innovation team, I don't know, by now, probably 10 years ago, really to say, look, what are the risks, what are the opportunities in the future, right? What do our members expect us to do? And then even more importantly, how do we start that journey? Because scaling is the next step, you need to start somewhere. And one of the things where we started in the beginning was saying, look, sustainability must be one of those big things. I mean, at that time, it was still pretty early on, there was not kind of a Green Deal yet, etc. But I think on sustainability, if I would ask any of you, why is it relevant for you? Maybe some of you say it's all for the engagement because I want to make sure my kids have a life as well, you know, when I'm not there anymore. Maybe it starts from being compliant in the sense that I want to reduce the risk for my company, both financially and kind of legally. Or maybe it starts from an efficiency point of view because you're in supply chain and you need to deliver cost savings. In the end, it doesn't matter what is your personal driver. The big thing matters is, are you ready to do a transformation of your business, of your supply chain, of your work process? Because that's what is going to drive the value. I think it was referred a few times already. It's not one or the other one. I think Emmy mentioned it as well. The only way to make sustainability work is if you get value out of it, right? And that's really one of the things we have been working on in the innovation team. And then more specifically on reuse, this is indeed one of the topics that we have been opening up. So I'm really super excited actually today already, right, on all the things you have heard already. It shows that we're not super scaling yet, even though you could argue on the plant trace, it is a nice example where it is scaling within a specific set, but it is really scaling. But maybe first on for example, on the bottles, the glass bottles, probably before today you would have said, glass bottles, they were reused already, I don't know, 20, 50 years ago, right? And even there you see we're still learning our way how to make it happen. But I think Emmy mentioned, I hope I'm remembering the numbers correctly, that as of 20 cycles, right, you can get up to 80% carbon reduction. That's a lot, right? We're not talking 1%, 2%, it's 80%. And it also means that there is value behind it if you do it well, if you're willing to transform. Derek also clearly said, right, there is ways how to do it. There is RFID, so typically you don't need to invent new technology, you don't need to invent anything. It's more a matter of reapplying, bringing people together. And that's really where this whole trust comes. So the bros from the chocolate app, right? I mean, they nicely explain that if you bring people together, you collaborate. It doesn't matter if you're small or big. You collaborate, you have trust, you can create magic already. So let's have a look a bit. If you have the trust and you have the collaboration, what still needs to be true? And you will see these things come back in all the case studies you see today, you see elsewhere. So see it as a bit of a toolbox if you like to be successful. So one of the first things is obviously design for reuse. If you want to reuse a package, you need to make sure it still serves the purpose of being packaging, right? So it needs to work. But also it needs to be durable. I think it was mentioned in the previous presentation. It needs to be stackable, right? Because you want to be reusing, but you also want to still fill your trucks through the roof. You want it to be cleanable, again, nicely mentioned in the trace and in the bottle example. And there is many more things. And sometimes it goes down to turning theory into reality. For example, on the Smart Box, which is the thing you see on the screen, it's actually a reusable shipper. It was nicely equipped with all technology, RFID, etc. But when we were applying it in our supply chain, we were not ready technology-wise, and we were putting a paper label on it. Of course, that's not great, and that kind of breaks your financials, but this is just sharing that if you don't try, it's not going to work. But whatever you do, be ready to take the hurdles, right? Take it with a smile, learn from it, and move on. Secondly, I think you have heard it, if in the lean, I don't remember who put it on the slide, I think it was Robin or Senna putting it on the slide with from linear to circular, right? In a linear supply chain, you could say it's complex, but it's still linear, as the word says. It's pretty straightforward with 2-3 players. If you go circular, there is so many players that it gets really complex. And of course, you have all the reverse logistics, so you really need to think about it because there is new players that before you were not talking with. So you need to figure out, how am I going to get it back? If I want to wash my bottles or my crates, how far can I drive before, again, I create more carbon emissions than I'm saving? But luckily enough, by now, there is many companies that offer software, that offer tools to calculate it. So again, the main thing is, don't reinvent the wheel, don't start from scratch, make sure you connect. Use GS1 as a kind of little spider in the web to get you connected, because all of these things have been done, have been learned already. Talking about money, talking about efficiencies, maybe it's a no-brainer, but I think it's always true that whether you work in a supply chain collaboration program on sustainability or on something else, if there is a win-win for both parties, typically people will say, let's go. I think you would all agree on it. Now, very often when you start projects, you do it as part of a collaboration that might be commercially, and very often we always get stuck before we even start because it's about the money, etc. Now, guess what? If you go in there with a model to reduce the total loss and you say, look, there is in there for both of us, it can work, right? So that's really a plea to this audience. Many of you have collaborations already, one way or the other one. I would say collaborate, forget about the commercial piece for a second, and really look into this problem, like what can we do together, what can we learn, and then let's demonstrate there is value. But of course, there is also value for the new kids on the block, so for the ones that are creating the boxes, reusing the pullers. So yes, it gets a bit more complex, but the few examples you have seen, they have proven that there can be value for everybody. And I would say last but not least, especially in the GS1 community, of course you can have a nice box, you can have a nice reverse logistics, you can have a nice business model, but you need to have this traceability, this identification, right? I mean, it has been mentioned several times as well. So also here, the beauty is you don't need to invent anything. Everything exists already. The GRI codes exist for I don't know how many years already. The GLN exists, the EPCIS model exists. Maybe next year on the forum we talk EPCIS with something we can actually know how to use it. So all of these things, they exist. It's more a matter of bringing the right people together and really make it work and kind of showing it as a community. We also talked a few times about legislation. So this is a funny one or a painful one, depending how you want to look into it. I think when we started to work also in GS1 on sustainability, we were, I would say, looking with two lenses to legislator. On one hand, you say, look, please help us to create a framework, because if you have clarity, if you have targets, right, you can go. At the same time, you don't want to have a framework that is constraining you, right? So it's really like, how do we look onto it? So I think what we're trying to do today, at least, is really saying, look, legislation is a catalyst, so let's not wait for it. Let's not wait for PPWR to, tell us how much to reuse. Let's just make sure we're ready, and whenever the legislation is there, we can accelerate, right? So that's a bit of the mindset we're trying to do. But of course, at the same time, whenever the legislation is there, you have to be compliant. And so again, I think if you keep these three things in mind when doing new projects, probably it's going to help you a lot to be successful in the end. So long story short, on reuse, I hope it's all clear why it's important. It's not just to replace one thing with another one. It's not just to go from recycling to reuse. It's really about how can you reduce the carbon emissions behind it, right? How can you make sure there is less waste? How can we make sure we have more efficient use of the resources? In a way, again, that it drives cost efficiency, it drives compliance, and it drives engagement from everybody that is on board. Again, we need more pilots like the beautiful ones we saw today. This is really, small companies, they don't have a big IT team. They just say, look, I know this one and you know that one, let's go together, let's learn from it. Again, use the GS1 team as a facilitator to guide your projects. If you don't know how to collaborate, if you don't know from an antitrust point of view, what can you do? That's exactly where this team is there. Again, also within the GS1, there's then different teams, more from standards and IT and innovation team. You don't have to bother on that one. So really the point is really, I would say today, maybe another call to action. I know there has been a few today already. So really, if you have a genuine interest on sustainability, on cost, on compliance, on anything, reach out to us. There are many pilots active where we need more members, more brands, more retailers, more solution providers. If you know what you want and you need help, also come to us. We're very happy to help you. So again, I hope you're willing to join the journey, and I'm nicely handing back now to Virginie.